Councillor Swift still... He is here, isn't he?
We're live.
Oh, right, lovely. So welcome everybody to this meeting of the Transport Committee on Friday the 18th of November. We've got a number of items to get through on the agenda. After this meeting is finished, obviously it's a formal meeting of the Transport Committee for West Yorkshire, but we're going to have a real strategy briefing after this formal meeting, so please members, if you can stay behind for that. I believe members should have received a draft summary, executive summary, so officers want to hear our opinion on that and want to brief us on the slides accompanying that, so please do stay. This is a slot from 2 till 4, and obviously the meeting hopefully we'll get through before that, so we can go on to that rail strategy if everybody's okay with that. So we have councillors representing all parts of West Yorkshire and indeed York here, who will be able to contribute to the meeting today and give their residents' views on the papers we have in front of us. We also have bus operators and train operators here, to which welcome, who will be contributing during the agenda when we come to particularly on bus and rail performance update. So let's start the meeting proper. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Sinead Engel and also Councillor Ross Shaw and Councillor Khan for lateness, Hassan Khan for lateness, but he should be here in 20 minutes' time. Any other...
Yes, apologies from Councillor Mel Jones from Wakefield.
We've also had apologies from Amir Hussain, Councillor Clark, Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Hayden and Councillor Salam.
Thank you very much. So declarations of any disclosable pecuniary interests. Any to declare? No, people can always declare as they go through the meeting if something occurs to them. Exempt information, possible exclusion of the press and public. I don't think there are any exempt items today. No. Minutes of the meeting of the Transport Committee are held on the 14th of October. Those have been circulated in these papers. Are there any comments, questions on those? No. So can I take those as a correct record of that meeting? Yes, I propose that. Manisha can second that. All those in should please show. Thank you very much. Bus service improvement plan and enhanced partnership update and approvals. So this is us approving the money that needs to be spent to put the fares properly in place and some of the service improvements we want to see made. So Helen, is this you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this paper encompasses an update of kind of a number of things that are going on within the bus service improvement plan. The first area in here, just to provide an update on what's actually said in the paper on the enhanced partnership scheme. We have this week made our enhanced partnership scheme, which means we are now in a position to draw down the funding from government to allow us to start actually spending the bus service improvement plan money. So that should hopefully process through today, and then we'll be in that position, which is really good news. As a reminder, the enhanced partnership scheme needs to be in place to help us actually deliver the bus service improvement plan funding. We can't do one without the other. So that enables us to continue to be in a position to fund the mayor's fares and do further work around the network side. The paper also gives an update on the mayor's fares, and I'll let Dave come in a minute to give a bit more of an update on the numbers around that. And then thirdly, the paper provides an update on the bus network plan, which we've had workshops with yourselves over the time on that, and a number of conversations individually over that process. We are just currently working through kind of a long list, if you like, of enhancements, and the paper sort of sets this process out. And then we are looking to come in towards having a further workshop with Transport Committee in December to kind of get to a point where we have a proposed list of services that we think should be prioritised for the early first phase of funding. The paper also just sets out, therefore, the need for the actual funding assurance and approvals. The set out in 2.19, the strategic outline case that was submitted to the Combined Authority to allow us to progress the first stages of the bus service improvement plan was put forward, and this approval is requesting for funds to cover both development work for BSIP as well as delivery of the Mayor's fares through to May next year. So Transport Committee are requested to approve that spend, and also approve taking kind of further decisions in the future around kind of delivery of the bus service improvement plan funding. I think that's everything in the initial bit. And don't know, Dave, whether you want to come in on the fares now.
Okay, just before you do that, Dave.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, because obviously, so obviously just want to make sure that we are getting the money from government, because there was some concern, obviously, with the chaos that's been happening nationally, that they might even cut back what they said they're going to give. Is that not the case? Is that confirmed we are getting the money they promised?
Yeah, yes, I can confirm that as we speak in another part of the building, the necessary paperwork is being signed and sent back to the Department for Transport, so that the money can actually be, or the first instalment of the money can actually be sent to us by the end of November. So we, as Helen said, we pushed quite hard to make sure the enhanced partnership documentation was all signed and with the Department for Transport ahead of yesterday's autumn statement, so that we'd done everything we needed to do, and government have, in fairness, said they will honour the bus service improvement plan funding. So I think we're in a good place in that. Just to cover the fares element of the bus service improvement plan, and as I think we've covered at previous meetings, that actually was introduced ahead of the confirmation of government funding, and the combined authority meeting agreed to sort of pay to proceed with that at risk, as it were, financially ahead of this, so that we did get something in place for the start of the academic year and in response to the cost of living crisis. So we're now into the third month of that, and what we said was we would look at the how it's been performing across the first 3 months, and that sort of shapes how we go forward. And obviously we're just about to finish the third month. The early indications of overall bus patronage by adults, so we take away the free bus pass users and take away the younger people, is that we're seeing some definite sort of green shoots of improved patronage in September compared with June, and better average monthly passengers in September than the average across the year to date. So that's early indications are that the fares policy, and obviously the wider economy as well, is encouraging more bus travel. So that's I think that's a positive, but we'll get some more definitive figures as the financial year goes through. I think the other thing to say is, I think as Helen's pointed out, we're sort of staging the approvals for the bus service improvement plan work, and this is the first stage. And in terms of the fares initiative, that releases the funding up until May. That doesn't mean the scheme comes to an end in May. What it means is that by the time we get to May, we'll have had the benefit of quite a few months of operation. We'll be able to tweak and adapt the methodology we use to distribute that money back to bus operators, and be in a bit more informed place to release funding for the continuation of the scheme. So that's broadly why the May date is in the papers that you've got. So hopefully, and useful to get any anecdotal feedback members have. But in terms of the maximum single fare and the £4.50 maximum daily cap, I think that's generally been well received by customers, and we've had some very positive feedback from them.
Thanks, Dave. And as you say, the data we've got back so far is fairly thin, actually. From this is, we could do with a lot more detailed evidence.
We will have actual numbers of people using it, and there's a few little data issues we're just working through with bus operators to make sure we got the richness. The other challenge we've got is actually what do you compare this with, because we've had 2.5 years of instability in many things, including bus patronage. So just benchmarking it against something is quite difficult. That's why we chose June as the first sort of comparator, because that was the previous month that schools were in, and travel patterns were something like what September looked like.
So I'd go back 3 or 4 years, to be quite honest, and just look at the trajectory of travel,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
obviously the differential between patronage and increase.
Yeah, we'll do that. We to be fair, we have much better data on bus patronage now than we do for 3 or 4 years ago, because we've sort of strengthened our data agreements with bus operators. Also, the availability of data is better now because of new technology and things like that. But we'll do quite a lot of benchmarking against the best sort of data series we've got to be able to understand what's going on here.
Any questions, comments on that so far?
Can I just ask for a change of the Freudian slip in paragraph 1.23 of the appendix, where it suggests that the benefits are an increased modal shift from bus to car.
Can we please amend that immediately? Well spotted, Councillor Hutchinson. Councillor De Goen.
Thank you. Paragraph 3 refers to the tackling the climate emergency implications, which is obviously a very welcome key element of the purpose behind this programme. I just wonder if you could explain a bit. Paragraph 3.7 is a bit technical and refers to presumed to be fully compatible but more likely to be conditionally compatible. I don't quite understand what the difference between, I mean, obviously one would assume that getting more people using buses is going to help achieve that, but it's interesting to see there's a specific assessment being applied, and just wonder how that works.
What paragraph was that? So can you hear page and para?
3.7, sorry, I haven't got page numbers on this.
All right, that one. All right, fine. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. So this reference is kind of the carbon impact assessment that all kind of promoters now have to do for every scheme that's put forward. So and there are different levels of activity, if you like, per different stages, shall we say. So given the BSIP is presented at this stage as a programme, if you like, then it's a different level of assessment to what it would be further down the line for different projects.
Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just the whole plan is going to be funded by the £70 million. We understand that. And we've talked about, well, for instance, lowering the fares to £2 costs an awful lot of that, over half. But I wanted to look at it from the other end because, to use an example which is just outside my ward, there's a major it's a suburban road, but it carries a lot of traffic all the time really, including it's a bus route. And as part of the Leeds plans, which Councillor Carlin will be aware of, this was down to have some improvements. It was down to have, this is King Lane, a bus lane and a junction improvement and so on. That's been deferred. But the point I'm going to make is two small items, in my view, could improve things and could improve the services. More bus shelters. You know, people at outlying stops in windy spots have no shelter. They might want to go on the bus and they might just think, well, actually, I'm probably going to get blown to bits or damp and I'm not going to use it. But secondly, and this was the point I was making about this particular route, the bus service, which has been there for 50 years, I would imagine, or more, stops in the middle of the carriageway. It's a suburban, ordinary carriageway road. There is room at the side to have a lay-by. The bus could pull in. And I know all the stuff about buses don't like to pull in and pull out. Well, surely that would be a gain. The bus would be out of the traffic and it would allow cars to stop all the emissions because they'd be flowing along at 20 miles an hour. Instead, they're just waiting for this bus to move. first question. So I'll leave it there for the moment. Actually, I'll come back later on if you like.
The buses are also acting as a sort of chicane in that sense, aren't they? It depends how fast cars are going as well, I suppose. It's like it actually prevents traffic going too fast as well, doesn't it? People.
No danger.
Oh, is there? I don't know Kings Lane, so.
Yeah, just to reassure Councillor Buckley, in some ways the bus service improvement plan revenue funding that this paper deals with needs to be looked alongside the city region transport settlement capital funding that was sort of secured in parallel with this, because that's where the infrastructure improvements for bus and other transport interventions is funded. So to a certain extent there is a sort of parallel funding that supports the very things that Councillor Buckley is mentioning. And I think it's a very valid point that sometimes some of the smaller interventions can actually make quite a lot of difference. The particular point on bus shelters is that we could fund more bus shelters through that programme. We do tend to look at bus shelters in the context of how many people wait at the stop, and that tends to be our general sort of measure and you'll often see more bus shelters on the inbound side of a road into a town or city than you see on the outbound for that reason. So we would look at how many people were using the stop, but I think we do understand the point that actually generally if you make it easier for people to wait and get on and off a bus, that's there's a sort of small interventions that actually all add up to making the bus more attractive for people.
Bit of a chicken and egg thing, isn't it, really? If you want more people to use it, then there needs to be a shelter in the first place, I suppose, is what Councillor Buckley would say with that. And also, we do get bus shelters funded through 106, don't we, and things like that. So
We very often do, yes. I mean, if a development is creating a change in the way these things, we do tend to use Section 106 to improve the provision in the local area.
Councillor Bolt?
Thanks, Chair. And just coming in on the point that you made, yeah, we should be putting shelters in to stimulate growth. Arriva have just moved the 229 service from which runs Huddersfield to Leeds. There were shelters on the old route, but on the new route there aren't, and it's a more exposed location. So as we go now towards winter, to achieve this 50 people a day or whatever, how many people are going to be standing out in the howling gales when they come out of work or from the new houses that they built in Murfield, if there isn't the shelter and information like that? So, and the element there that when the development for the Murfield 25 enterprise zone went through, if Wyker didn't secure the 106, then we have to have a look at how we're going to square that circle, because if we don't put in robust requests to planning authorities, we lose the money. And also I've seen it where we have had 106 and developers have argued and got them taken out. Wyker have agreed to take bus shelters and things out of some places. So again, we come back to the robust case. But looking at the report, a couple of points I'd like some clarity on, please, Chair. Page 31, the final paragraph, says that a project initiation document or other similar one has not been provided with a strategic outline case. Casting my memory back to when I did my Prince 2 qualifications, project initiation was the first thing that you did, and everything else then flowed from that. But if we've got a strategic outline case and we haven't got the basics written down, I'd just like some clarity on that, please. Again, we've now got the enhanced partnership, and we're told that in 2.2 at the start of it, DFT said what it wanted to see: cheaper and simplified fares we're doing, but increased service frequencies and new routes before funding will be released. So where are we with getting an effective network that we want to see this modal shift that the passengers want, so that we're not getting things like we've just had where we get a change of one route and then, as we've discussed before, pupils at two schools are disadvantaged and therefore are not going to become bus users because of changes of bus routes. So where are we with us as an authority determining which is the key route networks and stimulating that growth? And again, this is in the table 1, which underpins the funding, that evolution and growth of the bus network. And yeah, I think that's something we need to really move forward to. And if I could make a request on the recommendations, Chair. that we're asked to give approval for the 69 million. Could I ask that the table 1 on 2.3 is appended to the recommendation, so that not only are we asking to give approval for that up to 69.974 million, but we're also setting out that what we're approving is encapsulated in that table. Table 1, page 10, adds up to 69.9 million. The 36.9 for the mayor's fares, clear and simple fares. So that, I believe, is for the funding that we're asked to agree. And I think it would be useful if that was encapsulated in the recommendations. We're not only giving approval for up to that, but this is what it's being spent on. So that the recommendation...
Is that not implicit?
Yeah. Do you want to come instead? Yeah. So what that table 1 that you're showing there is kind of the overall BSIP revenue funding. What we're asking for today is the first phase of that money to be released to enable delivery, which the number for that is in the recommendations.
Because we don't have, presumably we don't have the full money from government yet, so we can't release the whole of it, is what you're saying. Is that straightforward?
The recommendation is indicative approval of costs of up to 69.974 is given. But we do, we have the breakdown of what that indicative approval is, so we should be including that. Otherwise, we're just giving, if we sign off today that we approve this, we're giving the blank cheque for spending of up to 69 million, or nearly 70.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's two different figures here. So the indicative funding amount is the amount of the total BSIP approval over the whole of its programme. What we're actually asking for here is the release of the first tranche. So we're only asking for you to approve the 16.9 million. We're not asking you to approve the total 69 because we'll come back and ask for further approvals to spend the rest of the indicative allocation. So the approval today is, yes, the indicative allocation is 69, that's the total amount of the programme, but we're just asking for the first tranche to be approved of the 16.9.
So we can't include that table, presumably, therefore, because we're not actually approving that amount of money today.
It's an indicative breakdown of how we would spend the money across the programme, but when the next approval comes forward, it may change slightly depending on the detail in the business case. So it's an indication as to how we would spend the whole funding, but we're not stuck to that. It's not set in stone at this stage because we'd need to see the business cases come through.
And Helen, Dave, do you want Councillor Bolt asked another question there as well?
Yes, I'll address Councillor Bolt's question about the bus network. So I think the paper sort of sets out, as we just said, the first sort of tranche of the funding, and isn't actually proposing any funding around the network, bus network yet, because there's quite a lot of work that's been done to support that. The intention is to bring a definite plan around how that money would be spent on the network to the February committee, and to have some workshops with members ahead of that, so that we're sort of engaging with you on what that looks like. We also have the we're under the river cloud of the uncertainty of government funding around bus networks as well. We've got funding for the remainder of this financial year, but we've got lots of uncertainties around what happens at the end of the financial year in terms of the government support that's sort of post-pandemic support that's maintaining the bus network. So we sort of need a bit of clarity around that as well in the ensuing weeks, so that we can come up with a sort of cohesive plan to spend the next phase of this money improving and enhancing the bus network.
We live in uncertain times, don't we? So a lot of this has had to be done at pace without having full approvals and full oversight or full decision making from government at the moment. So we're hoping now we're getting to a more stable phase when we have agreements from government, then we spend it after we've received it. But it's all been very tricky, hasn't it? Obviously, we're trying to get money out to people as quickly as possible in these very uncertain times. Any more questions or comments on this, Councillor Buckley?
Yeah, on page 13, Chair, 223, items 4 and 5, and both these items ask for approval to cost of £1 million for each item. And I just wanted a bit more clarity. £1 million, it's a round figure, but it's also a very high figure. And for instance, on item 5, £1 million on marketing. That sounds an awful lot.
So, this is indicative, Councillor Buckley. So, who's making that noise? Councillor Khan, shut that phone up, whatever it is. So, first of all, the Safe Partnership thing is all about PCAs on buses, is my understanding. And obviously, we all in our authorities will have had problems with people throwing stones at buses recently, which is appalling. And that will help with that. But there needs to be a full case coming, and I think that will come to this committee, won't it, for us to have a look at. I've also asked for the marketing thing isn't just marketing. It's about incentivising people to try the bus. So it could be try before you buy kind of thing. And again, I've asked for a full strategy of how that's going to work.
Yes, I think
it's not just marketing.
I think that this approval, because things like marketing, we're already committing to promoting the fares offers and things like that. So this approval sort of enables a sort of drawdown of funding against that. But I think, as the chair said, we need a clear and cohesive plan that's not just about marketing. It's about behaviour change. It's about incentivised. So it may actually sort of deploy other offers into the mix in terms of encouraging people to use the bus. So there's more work to be done, but I just sort of in the original bid, we've sort of earmarked £1 million for that purpose, and so that enables some of that. And we've obviously drawn down some money to do the things we're doing at the moment. We're about to go for the Christmas campaign, for example. So that process has started. On the Safer Travel Partnership, we already have a partnership with West Yorkshire Police in a limited form. This upscales it, and as the chair has said, particularly to deal with antisocial behaviour and the sort of actions and interventions we can do to make people feel safer using the bus, and to do something similar to what the British Transport Police do on the railways on the bus, and that's really what that's seeking to do.
So can we have a bit of an outline for both those, so we can share those with the Transport Committee, so they can have some input into that?
There's quite a lot of these items are where we will bring back plans of how we're going to deliver it.
Thank you. Any more? Councillor Bolt.
Thanks, Chair. I don't think I got a reply about why we didn't have a project initiation document. But one other concern, on page 26, 1.24, an assessment of the probable benefits and value for the money position for the full BSIP has not been provided. And it says it will be considered as part of further development. So I'd like to know when the value for money outline, which we'll be monitoring, will be brought forward. Because the suggested trip increases, as this is in that paragraph, are anywhere from 27% to 142%. So it's a wide range. Very sticking a finger in the air outside, isn't it? I think I could have put a wide guess like that and sent a consultancy. Thank you. So when will the value for money assessment be brought forward, and when will we see the project initiation document so we can monitor things as we go forward?
Can we also provide an assurance document to governments, ask them how they're managing their risks at the moment? Because actually, they could do with answering a few of these questions themselves. But Helen, off to you.
Okay. So both of those things. So the strategic outline case for BSIP was presented at a programme level, and then more detail provided on the couple of the things that we actually wanted the short approval through today on those bits of detail. The other parts of it, as we've been discussing, will come through as separate projects. So that project initiation document and that value for money will come through with the further detail that's developed on each of the projects. So there'll be a network project, there'll be a further Mayor's Fairs project, there'll be all of those different elements, for example.
Lovely, thank you. Any more questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Caffrey, sorry if I missed you earlier.
Sorry, quickly. It's just a bit pedantic really, but on page 19 on Appendix 1, that list at the bottom, it says the impact of this, that and the other. It says the portfolio will provide the following benefits, not may or is intended to. And it says increased bus patronage, increased modular shift from car to bus, car to bus to car, customer satisfaction, etc. But there's no time scale for that. Who's going to measure it? How will we know that all these have been achieved? I mean, I admit that, you know, that I admire the author's optimism, but will I be alive or will you be alive? I don't know. There's no kind of like...
How you're feeling, Councillor Catherine?
Well,
I'm feeling hale and hearted today.
It's an easy statement to make. It's very bold, but it needs to be qualified with some kind of time scale, or how would you know it's achieved? I mean, we're talking a lot of money here, so people have the right to know that if we're saying will, not may, what's the date?
Councillor Catherine wants, Councillor Carlo wants to come in there.
I was going to come in with a simple answer, which it is a 5-year funding settlement. So 5 years is the time at which we've got to have achieved.
So I'll put it in my diary and then come back and...
You can come back, but I guess on the
all these things
targets of that,
absolutely.
the targets will be set on a project level anyway as to what each bit does. But 5 years is your answer on
it's probably a bit
how long
pedantic,
we've got the
but I
funding to.
It's a very strong word to use, is will.
Yeah, and can I just let's all be really realistic about this as well, because of course this is being done as one measure within a very changing world that we're talking about at the moment. We haven't mentioned yet today the bus recovery grant, which we understand will be going in March, which obviously takes a lot of money out of the network. Obviously we're going to come on to performance of buses which have been less reliable, which also impacts on patronage. So we don't hold all the cards with this project, and I think, you know, we need to be mindful of that going forward as well. And you're right, I'm a right one for data and targets. I love them. Not everybody is, but I love them. So we will definitely make sure we hold to account on that. But we need to look as we're going forward what the environment is like and make sure that we're setting smart objectives and not ones that don't work. So Dave, Helen, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that text there and the kind of the context of that text is taken from the bus service improvement plan original document. So within there's targets and there's key performance indicators set out as to how the whole BSIP will be achieved. We got funding, if you recall, our original actual revenue ask in there was about 160 million. We got funding for 70 million, which was a good outcome, but obviously significantly smaller. So the kind of the scale at which we can achieve those benefits is obviously reduced.
So it's will subject to resources.
Yeah. So I think that what we need to do is to make sure that, you know, when would be the appropriate time to bring this back to the Transport Committee to see how it's doing against the target set. And I think that is, you know, it's a valid thing for us to do as a committee.
Yeah,
So we are required to report annually to DFT on our targets and on our KPIs. That was not the decision was taken by DFT to not really do that this last October because of any funding hadn't come through. So it'll be done over the next kind of year. So they're kind of currently deciding what a year is, whether it's October or whether it's kind of April at the moment. So that's kind of, but we can bring more information on that in turn.
But we'll bring that to here as well before we.
Yeah, definitely.
So obviously then, whenever the DFT define a year, we'd like to see it here before that year ends.
Yeah.
I think we'd be all happy with that. Lovely. Any more questions or comments on this paper?
Reassured, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Caffrey. Any further questions or comments on this paper? No? So in that case, I'm happy to recommend for approval the recommendations in the report. Let's get on with this. Can I see, Councillor Carlisle, did you want to second that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I see all those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is carried. So let's get on with it and make sure it improves matters, but we do want to see that it is making a difference. Because, of course, if things change and these elements are not making as much of a difference, then we need to change our approach. We need to be flexible. So it's all about increasing patronage. And I think going forward, obviously, we're going to talk next about, you know, bus service and rail performance. The reliability also impacts on patronage, and that impacts on the investment we're making. So it's a good segue really to going to the next piece. Dave, did you want to introduce this?
Yes, I'll introduce it, Arthur. But I think the reason this paper's here is I think at the last meeting there's quite a few members who expressed concerns about how how both buses and trains were performing, and the sort of implications for passengers and for people's lives that was bringing. So I thought it was quite important just to have a few minutes today just to understand where that is. So what this paper is doing is sort of setting out the sort of the high level sort of performance across West Yorkshire, both on bus and rail, and also we invited the bus and rail operators to prepare content which is in the report for you as to their perspectives, and we've got representatives of First Arriva on the bus side, and Northern Rail and TransPennine Express on the rail side to address any particular points that members want to make. But just I think, Chair, we were going to do bus first, then do rail. So just a few words from me on bus, and obviously members can come along with the points they want to make. But we put a little table which we've aggregated up the information we've got from bus operators across West Yorkshire in the report. Takes us up to September. I think the numbers are telling us that whilst the general target is that 99.5% of bus journeys run, accepting that there are some force majeure type conditions under which a bus might not operate, and we're looking at around about 95%, and so that's a long way short of that target. And likewise on punctuality, we measure punctuality in two different ways. Punctuality being no more than a minute early or 5 minutes late, and it's measured both at the first stop on a route, where you would expect some pretty good punctuality, and then at bus stops along the way where the impact of traffic congestion can make buses run later. So you do see a bit of a difference. But again, the national sort of standard set by the Traffic Commissioner is that 95% of buses run on time, and anyway, we're looking at a lot less than that today, 89% from the first stop and 79% along the way. So there's quite a gap in terms of what the ideal situation is. Many factors at play in terms of bus punctuality, and we've talked in these meetings about bus driver shortages being a factor, traffic congestion being a factor, and so identifying some of the issues and some of the ways in which those issues are being addressed. In paragraph 2.7, where, because this has been raised at previous meetings and in other meetings, concerns around the real-time information system, and we've sort of kicked off a number of sort of activities to address any technical and operational issues that are impacting on that and making it buses appear to be running when they're not, and those sort of comments that people have put back to us. There isn't a fundamental issue with the system, but there are probably some aspects of the way in which we're using it, and some aspects of the way in which it's managing data from its various different sources that need investigation. So we're getting people in to do that. So I'll leave it there on the bus side, and obviously members will have their views as well.
Lovely, thank you, Dave. So let's, as Dave suggests, let's do buses first. Do the bus operators just want to introduce themselves so everyone knows who they are? I can see Brandon.
Yep, hi everybody, I'm Kim Purcell, I'm Commercial Director for Arriva.
Hi, good afternoon, Brandon Jones from First Bus.
Tom Bridge, Operations Director at First Bus.
Sorry, I thought you were doing buses first. Graeme John, Head of Regional Development, TransPennine Express.
Good afternoon, I'm Tony Baxter, Regional Director for Northern.
And I'm Pete Myers, Stakeholder Manager for Northern.
So we've got Arriva here and we've got First here. Thank you, welcome. Obviously, you've submitted some narrative in the document we've got with us today. Did you want to say anything as an opener before we open up for questions?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of very brief points, as you say. Dave's covered the majority of the points, and obviously the details are in the paper. I think first of all, welcome and positive news about the bus service improvement plan and the enhanced partnership that's in place. The West Yorkshire Bus Alliance, of which operators, combined authority and local authorities are partners, is an effective mechanism to help deliver that. Congestion is a factor in terms of performance, as Dave has outlined, but the main factor that's driving certainly First Bus challenges at the moment is the national driver shortage issue. Obviously, the challenge is also around the level of passenger return, which in some cases, like the leisure market, young persons market is very strong, but less so commuter market and the concessions market. I think during this period, I'd also just like to make the point that the operators continue to invest. Certainly, new vehicle investment and investment in the network has been maintained, and indeed we've been very keen to make sure that we continue to market and try and get the return to bus as a big part of our efforts at the moment. And finally, we just continue to work together with combined authority officers as we look ahead, as the Chair mentioned, around the bus recovery grant. There's some uncertainty about funding as we look forward, so we are actively working closely with officers to see what that looks like, particularly in light of recent improvements in passenger numbers, which we believe are partly down to the Mayor's Fares as well, which has been a welcome initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ariva?
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what Brandon's just said. The driver shortage does remain a significant issue. Although the situation is improving, we are seeing very high levels of absence, which compounds that problem. Increasingly, punctuality and our ability to maintain the timetables is becoming a much bigger concern for us. We've just been reviewing some of our timetables, which we intend to register today, and we're having to put up to 30 minutes additional running time in each journey. So it's significant, the delays that the buses are facing out there. And obviously, in order to address that, it requires more buses, requires more drivers, and it starts that cycle over again. But we are looking at how we can reinvest any savings we're making in the network to make the services that are out there as punctual as possible. And as Brendan says, investment is continuing, working in line with the enhanced partnership and the aspirations of the BSIP. Just as an example of that, Ariva are really pleased to be able to announce that we are launching tap-on, tap-off technology as of Monday. We announced that launch today in Wakefield Bus Station, along with the local radio station, Rhubarb Radio. But that will mean that all of the large operators in West Yorkshire, as of Monday, will then have tap-on, tap-off technology. And that's something that the operators have all done commercially. And that will enable us to then develop that into the multi-operator fare capping solution that West Yorkshire really wants and is aspiring to deliver.
Thank you very much. So I'll just start with Councillor Carlow. Did you want to come in initially? You're the obviously Deputy Chair of Transport, along with Councillor Kaushik, but responsible for buses largely, so just let you come in.
Yeah, thanks, I can do. I think we've got a couple of the operators here, and they've brought up some of the issues I think that are affecting the service, but I think it's clear, as we've seen, and as Managing Director of First West Yorkshire was quite happy to say, that this is one of the worst services the bus operators have seen themselves for a time with all these pressures. Not all of those pressures are ones that have immediate fixes, and not all of them are to do with the funding as well. However, the funding then is what makes it a real problem, because when we're looking at it at the minute, we're more looking at what happens when the money runs out rather than what happens to increase the patronage and where do we plan for. And I think that's the real difficulty. When we faced the funding challenge last time, it was on the day that bus operators had to register the routes they were going to reduce that the funding was extended. So I think my main plea is to work out what's happening there and whether we can have really good conversations with DFT on what funding may be coming, so that at least operators see a stable future and we can build on that and work to where we're going.
Absolutely, short-term decision making is not conducive to good partnership working, is it? So, questions, comments of the bus operators as we have them here today. Then we got any questions? Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. The reliability figures are aggregate figures which really don't tell us an awful lot about variation from service to service, because there's definitely, within Calderdale, there's definitely an impression that those services which are on the operator's shortlist for reducing or abolishing are the ones that have the worst level of cancellations of services. So it becomes that drives down usage rate, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I really would like to see the figures expressed as a range, so that we could appreciate that rather than just an average.
Yeah, the performance figures we've got in the document are a bit blunt, aren't they, really? It doesn't really give us what is the mean, mean mode, whatever it is, averages that Alan's at school, all those, and also by area, etc. Are there any specific issues that, the figure, a global figure, masks?
Yes, I mean, I think we have some data to be able to do that. We need to work with the operators on their data as well to be able to give that sort of level of detail. I think doing that on down at route level might be quite challenging in terms of the amount of information we'll be producing there. But I think what this is really needs to be driving both combined authority colleagues and bus operator colleagues towards is an analytical approach to this, so that we actually understand where the problems are, where the problems that the traffic network's causing, where the problems that the operation of the bus service is. So obviously cancellations in particular are not acceptable, are they? I mean, there's no way of sort of sugaring that, and we need to get our cancellation number down.
If I may, Chair, yes, it is particularly the cancellations rather than the punctuality that I'd be keen to see that level of detail.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, actually. And just taking up this whole issue of reliability, it's there as, it's a nice word, reliability, but when you're standing at the bus stop, it means it doesn't turn up. And really, Brandon knows that we've had problems with all sorts of services, in my ward in particular. And people are saying, well, we'll put up with it for so long. If the bus doesn't turn up once in 6 months, well, it's kind of one of those things. But if every other time that you attempt to go, it doesn't turn up, and people just give up. They just give up. And so, as has already been said, people just then say, oh, well, I'll buy a second-hand diesel then. And away we go. And then the next question I was going to ask was about this ongoing driver shortage situation. How many drivers, let's say with First, how many drivers do First have? And let's just say that First paid them another £5 grand a year, or offered into the market that was what the rate was going to be. Would that, in theory, solve the problem? So an extra £5 grand, all the drivers come along, and multiplying the 5,000 by the number of drivers, does that sum of money then, is that going to be less than the extra passengers potentially recruited?
So if I sort of come in on the thing about attraction, it's not just about money. It's partly about money. The major issue we have is that we've early on in sort of the post-pandemic period. So if I go back 14 months, we lost quite a large number of drivers to haulage firms, to logistics, because at that point they were offering much higher salaries. But the people who went to logistics pretty soon discovered it was actually quite a tough job involving a lot of working away from home, and many then drifted back into buses. The area where post-pandemic we've seen the most challenge is the reluctance to work unsociable hours. And the real challenge for us is finding ways of incentivising people to work late at night or early in the morning. So I think we have worked with the trade union to improve pay rates, but it's far more complicated than just pay. I wish it was simple, to be honest.
if I can just come in to add to that, so as Tom said, that the hours of operation of the bus industry are naturally unsociable. We start very, very early and we finish very, very late, and a lot of other industries can tempt people away on the basis of that. We are taking more flexible approaches to how we recruit people. We recruit part-time people now, whereas as an industry we never did that previously. As we say, we have been working with the trade unions, and in fact in the last year they got the biggest increase on record. So we do recognise that our staff do deserve strong pay increases, but that has to be affordable. And in direct answer to your question, no, the cost of paying those wages would not be offset by the lost revenue, nowhere near, is probably the simplest way to put that. And one of the biggest challenges we have for our drivers is that they are the front of the face of the industry. So when a customer is frustrated that their bus hasn't turned up, they understandably often take that out on the next bus that does turn up. And clearly that's not that driver's fault. So we have a challenge as an industry there, to try and encourage our customers to understand that that driver that does turn up is actually there doing his job, and it's not his fault or her fault that the previous bus hasn't turned up. That's for us collectively to resolve. Just in answer to the previous point about do we cancel the routes that are less desirable to us as an industry, I guess probably the easiest way to explain that is the routes that generate the most patronage clearly have the highest frequency, so they'll typically have a 10-minute or more frequency. The buses which carry the least people have a much lower frequency, often that's hourly, for example. Now clearly when we're faced with a situation where we don't have a driver or a vehicle, we're not going to cancel an hourly service and leave a 2-hour gap if we can help it at all. We would cancel the 10-minute service because that customer then only has to wait another 10 minutes. So we absolutely prioritise the low frequency services to make sure that they operate. We also prioritise tendered services, school buses, buses that serve hospitals. So we don't make decisions on which services need to be cancelled based on how much money they take. We base those decisions based on how much a customer will be inconvenienced. Now, there are lots of complexities around that. You've got to have the right route knowledge, you've got to have the right vehicle size, you've got to have a driver that's within their operating hours. So we can't always achieve it, but I can absolutely assure you that we always prioritise those that would feel the impact of a service cut the most.
Thank you. Obviously, everybody should treat drivers with respect and public service workers with respect. I think we're obviously all of us who work in this field know that that's the best way to go, and we should all be mindful that people are human beings at the end of the day. I do think this Councillor Buckley's question leads very much to what we're all trying to get to, really, which is open, transparent data, information, revenue information, so we can see what the issue is. Because otherwise, we ask questions without knowing what impact it has. If we all have all the data on the table, knew what revenue is, then we can actually start to make some decisions together. And I'm hoping the enhanced partnership is going to help enable us to do that. Because unless we get to that stage, we're never going to be able to work really as a collaborative. I've got Councillor Wilson first, then Councillor Bolt, and then Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Could you tell us about how you, outside of recruiting drivers, is there anything else you can do to improve reliability? What are you doing on that? And related to that, I've recently had a few people telling me about being at a bus stop. Sorry, this is particularly for First Bus. People being at a bus stop and the buses just driving straight past them at the bus stop, and that actually happened to me twice in a row on a rainy morning last week. I stuck my arm out and the buses went straight past, and there were a few of us at the bus stop and we couldn't really understand why that happened. What I wondered was whether the sort of drive for reliability meant that, or not being behind on the timetable meant that bus drivers are going past some bus stops, or otherwise what the explanation for that might be. But apart from that, just in general, what are you doing to improve reliability outside of recruitment of drivers?
Okay, I mean, to be totally honest, in terms of reliability, the key to it is it's not just recruitment; it's also retention. What we've seen in the last 18 months is that turnover has been quite volatile. Right after the pandemic, it was up at one point at 45%. It's since came down to 15% earlier in this year and has gone back up to about 25% more recently. And hopefully, and the signs are in the run up to Christmas, it's coming back down again. And obviously, the way to address that is improved retention, and that is some of the things that Kim was talking about to do with trying to change work patterns. That is the fundamental reason we're losing people, to be honest. On the point to do with buses going past, obviously the only reason a bus would go past is because the bus is full. Very occasionally that there might be another reason, but that's generally the main reason. And we do have a major issue on some routes. You know, I'm particularly conscious. I regularly receive comments about the X6 and the 72, where successive buses are full, and that sort of comes back to the issue ultimately of you know, trying to put resource in the right place, because on the one hand we're trying to run the entire network, and as Kim said, we never. I wouldn't say we always succeed, but we do our best to make sure that the extremities and the least frequent services don't get cancelled. And that does mean that, unfortunately, the burden falls on the frequent routes, which are sometimes the busiest. And that's why you're often seeing full buses before they get to their terminus.
Okay, Councillor Wilson, if you've got a specific route where it wasn't full, I think that would be useful to give.
Yeah, it was on Otley Road. It was on Otley or Headingley Lane, and I can't remember actually which number. I think it was the 27. Yeah, and maybe the 6. But they didn't look full to me. And one of the people who reported it to me, I think she would have noticed if it was full. She's quite diligent, but yeah, to me it didn't look full. But thanks, that's useful to know.
Yeah, okay. I mean, sorry, Kim. Obviously, I'll take that away. I mean, I have to say that Headingley Lane is one of those corridors where, in fact, patronage levels are above where they were pre-COVID, and you know, and it is the one area we do have a particular problem with full buses. But nonetheless, I'll take it away.
Thank you. So, Councillor Bolt.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First, I'd like to thank Arriva. I've had an email to say that they will agree to come to a meeting in Murfield to discuss bus changes. So I'd like to thank them for that and look forward to arranging that. And I'll liaise with RFAC as well as our district lead so that you can be present if you can. I think that'll be more, given the controversy that we've had about Hackman Dwight Grammar School and other schools. Be looking forward to that. In the report, 2.8 on page 34, so the Mayor together with yourself and the Vice Chair had a roundtable with operators on the 9th of November to discuss and agree actions. Could we have an update on that, please? I think it'd be very useful. One of the things which we keep coming back to on reliability is network issues. And on page 35, Arriva have detailed problems that they've had at Newton Bar and Leeds City Square. Yeah, I would raise the issues that we have in Kirklees, because the report says that local highway authorities and the CA identify short-term mitigation. I'm not aware of any short-term mitigation to alleviate the problems that we've had with Arriva buses from Huddersfield to Leeds. For the last 6-9 months maybe, the problem has been the A62 from Huddersfield Town Centre to Leeds Road. Plenty of time to put short-term mitigation in, and as a layman I would suggest that instead of starting a bus service at Heckmondwike, you could have extended it back to Cooper Bridge, so that for the ones which were being stuck in the roadworks for the last 6 months or whatever, and it's still going to go on, I think, to February, March, is it, Eric?
Yes, unfortunately. I'll give you the reason why.
Well, the roadworks are ongoing. What we need is the mitigations for the bus service.
It was due to finish in December.
If there is a problem, we need, as it says here, we need the mitigations, and we need the planning so that when the CA, Calderdale and Kirklees are doing Cooper Bridge, we don't then have 3 years of the same, that buses can't get round Cooper Bridge. So let's get that mitigation and get things back on board, because again, the issue that we've said on many occasions is passengers will only be late for work a couple of times and then they'll stop using the bus. I've got a temporary bus stop near my house now, and my son won't use it to come to Leeds because he was 3/4 of an hour late once on the 229. he's not going to be three-quarters of an hour risk that. And again, that's partly an issue with network, and it's partly an issue with, Whitehall Road coming up to 9 o'clock in the morning is ridiculous. Yeah, you can walk faster than the traffic down there. With colleagues have already highlighted, and I welcome that we need to see better data on this. So look forward to that. I think those are the key issues that we're looking at. The cancellations, if the last bus is cancelled, you're entitled to catch a taxi and claim. But again, for many passengers, if you're going to work and your bus doesn't arrive within a reasonable period and you get a taxi, I think that should be reclaimable. Because again, if we can't run a reliable service and get people to make that modal shift now, then we're defeating all objectives. So we need to see some situation where the passengers are compensated if the bus operators miss. And finally, just a fairly light-hearted point, we had a bus launch once where we'd launched some issues at St George's Square in Huddersfield, and then we all went across to Bradford to do a similar thing. Everybody went across on the train, bus operators, councillors and others. So I'll just ask the bus operators if you come by bus to this meeting today.
Okay, before we go back to them, I just want to actually jump the queue bit and bring Councillor Thompson in, because it's something, compensation was something I think you wanted to bring up as well, just allied to Councillor Bob.
Thank you, Chair. So it's something that was mentioned briefly at the meeting on Saturday that was hosted in Horsforth by some councillors and first were in attendance along with Councillor Carlow. Frustration of passengers getting no response to their complaints, but also that although they have the right to claim for a taxi if their last bus doesn't come, how are they supposed to have, they may not have the cash or the means to actually book the taxi in the first place. And likewise, they may receive a voucher if they complain about the poor service, but if they don't use the app, the voucher that they get is of absolutely no use at all. So frustration that operators are not meeting the responsibilities that they set themselves for customer service, and it would be good to hear about how that will be addressed. A small side point that relates to some others on cancellations, and again this is something that has been raised before but it's important to raise it here. We have one particular service, the 33, I know I talk about it every time, but it's a lifeline for people. It's their only means to get to work, to school, to hospital appointments, and then to get back home after a 12-hour shift. We've had some days where 2 in a row have been cancelled. That service was cut from 3 an hour to 2 an hour before the pandemic with no consultation. That leaves people waiting an hour and a half between buses in an evening to get home when they've probably already been late getting in. And then women are having to walk maybe a mile in the dark to get from the bus stop to where they live, and they do not feel safe. And that's something that I have been asked to raise with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So we'll pause there just to take answers to those two contributions. First of all, Councillor Butt, just on the meeting that myself, Councillor Cowell and the Mayor Brabin had with the bus operators, you'll be pleased to know that many of these issues obviously came up at that meeting, as you can imagine. The Mayor is obviously a bus user herself and was wanting to know about reliability, punctuality, how the enhanced partnership is going to help with that, those service improvements we all want to see, and also asking about more data sharing so we can all get on the same page. So just to give you a précis of that conversation, I'm sure there's nothing that the Mayor would want to keep private from that. So I'm going to go to Ariva first, I think, probably, and then first, and I'll come to Dave.
Yeah, no problem. The journey guarantee comments are an interesting point. So we do have a journey guarantee promise within what was the Bus Alliance previously. So if somebody is unhappy with their journey, we will give them free journey vouchers to compensate them for their next journey. As you say, there are some challenges with that, but we are trying to encourage people to use technology to pass those vouchers to them. I think if we could get to a point where we had certain levels of guarantee on our ability to operate on the highways unobstructed, then a refund policy would probably be appropriate. But whenever we're facing, for example, 30-minute delays on Whitehall Road, that is entirely outside of our control. and therefore would it be the operator that would refund somebody for something that's entirely out of their control? I don't think that would be fair. So we do need to look at the two things together. It's about us putting the drivers and the buses out there at the time when we say it will be, where they say it will be, but it's also about us having access to the roads to be able to get the buses where they need to be on time. And just, I guess, a point talking about the Mayor's Roundtable that we discussed with the Mayor, you know, I think there is a perception that the bus companies aren't necessarily doing all they can in recruitment. Collectively, we've recruited 550 drivers this year, just between the three biggest operators in this region. That's a phenomenal amount of new people that we've gone out, recruited, trained and put on the road behind the wheel of a bus. So if anything, I can absolutely assure you that we are doing everything we can to get as many drivers behind the buses as we can to tackle the issues that are out there. But as I say, some of them are within our control, some of them aren't.
Hello there. A couple of points to add to Kim's there. I think first of all, in terms of what we're delivering together, I think a very interesting opportunity is the Urban Traffic Control Centre, which is in the Civic Hall. There's active conversations going on to join up that approach so that we are all looking at the same network at the same time, making decisions together around where vehicles need to be or where there needs to be intervention with things like traffic signalling and things like that. That has the potential to become a really good communication tool that we may even look to consider things like social media being part of that communication as well. So I think the Urban Traffic Control Centre and that development in Leeds, which looks after many parts of West Yorkshire, I think is a great opportunity looking forward. In terms of Councillor Thompson's comments, first of all, that there's absolutely no explanation or excuse for not replying to complaints which gets raised with us. I welcome Councillor Thompson's feedback and suggestions around how we can improve things, and I've said that if there are any residents who've not had responses, then they need to raise that with us, and we'll follow that up. In terms of vouchers, yes, we do encourage people to claim the vouchers or the free travel back via digital means, purely because it encourages use of digital technology. It speeds up boarding, and it's much simpler than say posting vouchers. But people that don't have access to smartphones, for example, are able to claim paper vouchers as well. So we're not limiting it to digital only. And finally, on the 3334, it's a very important corridor. In fact, it's a corridor that we are shortly going to be introducing new low emission vehicles on. So we're very keen that as part of that investment, we can help grow the corridor and encourage more people to use bus. And as part of that, we've got active conversations with the local authority on looking at traffic light interventions along the whole corridor as well. As people will be aware, the section, particularly from Horsforth through to Rawdon and Guiseley, is extremely congested with very little opportunity for bus priority at the moment. So buses do get caught up in that very congested corridor. And finally, to Councillor Bolt, park and ride at Sturton today. Same.
Thank you. So I think what would be useful actually after this meeting, if you could put something down as how you're performing as your customer charters, just so that we can circulate that with Transport Committee. If you've got some measures around that, that'd be really helpful to see. Dave, did you want to come back on the remaining questions?
Yes. Councillor Bolt raised mitigations for roadworks and things like that, and just to give a bit of reassurance, is that in each of the district areas there are regular meetings between bus operators, the sort of highways teams and the combined authorities teams to deal with the bigger schemes, and hopefully to plan in mitigations for that. I think one of the challenges that they have, to be fair, and mentions made of Whitehall Road and Leeds is a bit of an example, I think, is that some of the traffic congestion actually pops up in places quite remote from where the actual work's being done, and that's, that can be a bit of a challenge because the road network can be people are sort of trying to divert away and actually causing new hotspots that didn't exist, and I think that's one of the challenges that everybody faces. I think in terms of the customer service aspects of it that Councillor Thompson raised, you might have spotted in the detail of the bus service improvement plan paper before it, as well as the big picture stuff in the bus service improvement plan around fares and bus networks. The enhanced partnership aims to have a sort of create a consistency of approach across the bus network and across the bus service, and a customer charter is one of the things that we're working towards, so that we have a consistent approach to dealing with some of those customer inquiries, and that's probably a forum to take back that question that you raised regarding free journey vouchers and how they're delivered and that sort of thing. So we'll take a look at that in that forum.
Thank you. I've got Councillor McLaughlin and then Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up on one of the things that was said in your introductions, that you mentioned the driver shortages, which seems to be a problem that's facing the entire industry, but you also made specific reference to a big increase in driver absences. And I was just wondering what, in your opinion, as operators, is driving those absences, and what are you doing to improve working conditions for the drivers to make sure you not only retain them, but look after them in work? And in that, are you working with the trade unions to make sure you're doing everything possible?
Yeah, I don't think there's one answer to that question. I think it's a complex range of issues. So we employ predominantly 50-plus-year-old males, and because we have an ageing population in our workforce, we have an awful lot that are starting to get medical conditions as they get further into their careers. Because of the licensing restrictions we have, they often have to go through an enhanced medical process, and we do find that some people are either delayed at DVLA in getting their licence approved under medical conditions, and we're seeing an increasing backlog of people who've been waiting for treatment on the NHS that, as you'd expect, have been delayed because of the pandemic. Alongside that, we are seeing increased absences that you would suggest are because those individuals know they can get overtime because there's a driver shortage, so they can pick and choose their days off is probably the easiest way to put it. And then we still have COVID. COVID is still out there and it is still affecting our drivers. So it's a bit of a combination of all of those issues, but yes, we absolutely work with our trade unions to see how can we address those challenges, how can we work together. We've been lobbying via the CPT, the industry body, towards improvements with DVLA and getting drivers prioritised through that process to make sure that the vital role they play in our communities is acknowledged and prioritised accordingly.
Yes, sorry, just to sort of follow up on that. One of the things we've done recently is we're taking part in quite a large study with an NHS trust. It's called the Igloo Project to properly understand reasons for driver absence. Quite often, the reason stated on the fit note might not actually be the reason they're absent. They're absent for good reason, but often it might be a mental health problem or some kind of problem with caring or something like that. And it's just trying to get to the heart of what's the underlying issue behind the absence. So we're doing that study. We've also got things like mental health first aiders, far more of those in the workplace as well. But yeah, Kim is also right that the ability to obtain overtime is a factor as well.
Thank you. Microphone here. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work out that bus driver is obviously a very sedentary occupation, isn't it? Where people spend a lot of time sitting down and being shouted at by the sounds of it as well. So there are obviously some workplace issues where we could perhaps help them to have gym memberships and stuff like that, really, just to encourage a healthy lifestyle. So it's just that kind of career. Oh, having said that, the bus driver I know is Councillor Taj Salam is on a bike ride across to Cuba at the moment, so he is an exceptional role model for all bus drivers everywhere. Councillor Swift.
Yeah, it's Kevin Swift from Wakefield. So the question is really directed at Arriva. And it's going slightly off the agenda, Chair, in the sense that it's about the withdrawals and the reductions of bus services. Now, I think question I really want to ask is that although the government were very late in extending the bus service recovery money, I think Arriva are possibly standing out amongst operators for having gone ahead with fairly substantial both kind of service withdrawal and on but particularly kind of heavy thinning out on a lot of services run. And I suppose really what I wanted to ask was, how do you square the fact of taking the money but not providing the services?
Yeah, so that there are conditions attached to the bus recovery grant, so you have to maintain a level of service to be eligible for the grant. So we are still within the eligibility rules of the scheme. But fundamentally, the bus recovery grant has been maintained at the level it was when the recovery grant was introduced. Obviously, inflation has rocketed since then, and we are under incredible cost pressures. Our driver wage bills, understandably, have increased. Fuel has increased. Our operating costs have increased. So whilst the bus recovery grant was welcomed and meant that the cuts weren't as deep as they would have been without it, it was not enough to save those routes, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councillor Swift. I've got Councillor Buckley, and I think then we've finished and we're going to the train drive.
I'll be fairly brief, Chair. Two questions, please. We heard quite a lot about buses being held up in roadworks and consequently whether people can be compensated and all that kind of thing. And in particular, two references to Whitehall Road, which is obviously caused by the closure of City Square. So heads are nodding, right. What we used to have, in effect, was Neville Street and City Square was effectively a dual carriageway, full of hundreds of cars all the time, and they now can't do it, and so consequently this mess has occurred on Whitehall Road. So do the bus operators wish that the scheme had never been thought of in the first place? Or B, what would they like Leeds City Council to do about it? Now, the second question is, and this is slightly more pertinent to what was just being said actually, given the fact that apparently drivers have got health conditions because they cannot be seen under the National Health Service and the delays in the service at the moment, why don't the bus companies pay the drivers private health insurance?
Who would like to take those two questions? Which is the politician amongst you?
And I'll try. I'm not the politician. Okay, so first of all, on the Whitehall Road issue, we've worked very closely with the Combined Authority on the plans for the city centre, and I think we all recognise that the long-term aspiration of all the schemes is that buses will benefit, but that doesn't get away from the fact that we have to go through a period of pain in order to achieve that benefit. I don't think any of us expected the disruption to be as significant as it is in the areas that it is. So we have to continue working together to try and address those challenges. I do think that there are opportunities, and we have discussed these with Leeds City Council. The changes to Crown Point Road have meant that we've had to divert our buses away. There is an opportunity to convert Blackpool Street and give buses priority into the city. So there are things that could be done, but we have to genuinely want buses to be the faster option if we're going to make those happen, and it will take some politically brave decisions is probably the easiest way to say it in order to achieve them. In terms of the health insurance, so we do pay, certainly from Arriva's perspective, we do have something called Health Assured, which is an employee assistance programme which gives them access to kind of virtual GPs and to mental health assistance, etc. The reality is the backlogs in the NHS, a lot of them are things like operations that we just would not be able to financially afford to pay for those to be dealt with privately. But we do support our drivers in that sense.
Thank you. And everybody ever says, politician, that is very brave of you. You start to have alarm bells ringing, don't you? I think we all recognise that.
Very, very briefly, Chair, if you don't mind. It's not a question of paying for the operation.
We've got to get on.
It's paying for the insurance. It's only a couple of £100 a month.
Buckley.
Could I just add to Councillor Buckley's point? I think there are always challenges when we have to transform and we have to improve conditions and road conditions for both buses and for public realm. I think what we can look at is what's happened on the hedgerow in Firmary Street, Corn Exchange. Some very difficult situations, and we had to communicate really closely with our drivers, as well as our customers, as well as other road users. And I think what's happened in those situations that we can look at optimistically, I think, is that for the first time, and certainly in my recollection, is that both the constructors, the council, the combined authority and the operators have worked really closely together. And that's enabled some quite difficult situations to be explained as best we can to customers. So we've been able to, for example, to provide diversion information and alternative information. And I know there are some frustrations around the City Square works at the moment, but I know there's also active engagement around using park and ride, alternative roads, for example. So I think it's about working together the best we can to get the communication out to all of those audiences, and at least be able to intervene if necessary and raise issues like we have done through the whole Connecting Leeds project, where we've been able to say, actually, if you just moved that little bit of roadwork there or those cones there, or if you changed the times of construction slightly, it can have a big impact. So we've had direct contact and engagement in that conversation, and I think that's been quite helpful, although clearly that there is still some frustration. We're working really closely together to manage it as best we can.
Thank you. I want to read Councillor Carlisle, then we're going to move on to train.
Thank you. I was going to come in really quickly just to say, I mean, it is important to note that the works happening outside on City Square and all the works on the hedgerow that we've had for many years, they were all organised in partnership with the bus industry to remove the main congester that they have, which is the amount of private vehicles that are entering the city centre. So yes, we know, and you had this answer on Wednesday actually at the full council meeting, and you were told again, yeah, well, that's why you accused me of not knowing my brief in the middle of the meeting, which I do know very well, but but you got told again by the exec member you can't make the omelette without breaking eggs, and unfortunately that is the situation we're in with City Square at the minute. But I did want to highlight the Lip Tip scheme with the hedgerow. This week, I believe at the UK Bus Awards, it won the Gold Partnership Award for schemes around. So I think we are making those brave decisions that require us removing private cars in some ways out of the city centre to provide corridors for bus that are a lot more reliable than they were previously, and hopefully we'll see that coming in the years to come as that starts to progress.
So we all need to do that, don't we, as going forward, all our districts, to make sure we put our bus priority corridors in, segregated corridors, etc., to make sure we do play our part in trying to give you a more regular, reliable, frequent service. So thank you to the bus operators. Councillor Korshik, did you want to say a few words about trains before we go to TPE in North?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, but do they want to give any presentations off first? Yeah.
Chair, given time, I'm happy to cover any points and questions. I think any prepared statements will probably come up in the answers so far.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. A few questions on the behalf of customers. So, can you tell us if there is a clear plan and framework of measure which you are tackling to reduce cancellations on TPE service? You want me to carry on everything, or you want to come one by one? Yeah, I can give you all the.
Happy to, whichever way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Customers complain when there is a disruption, there is often no staff around or a staff information point to provide updates. And then disruptions to service has a big negative impact in local stations like Slowett and Marsden, where there is no alternative to TPE. And what being done to address these challenges?
Okay, thank you, Chair. There's behind those three questions, and thank you, Councillor, for them. There's quite a lot of information to sort of present in terms of one of the core problems we've got.
Could you move the microphone?
Oh, sorry. Are they wireless? All right. Is that any better, Chair? There we go. Okay, thank you. Yes, there's 3 questions there. But what I'll do is take a step back and put some information in context just to explain the ongoing issues that we have. And it's really important to start by actually apologising to you all as committee members, but also to the constituents you have, because it has been poor service, and we're very sorry for that. It's not the service we want to provide, but there are a series of fundamental ongoing issues that affect the service delivery we've got. To take a step back, we have, probably in the history of the business, we've got the most unprecedented level of training, which we have to do, but it's compounded by a backlog of training from the pandemic, trying to get new recruited train drivers, fully qualified, so they're active and productive on the main line. In terms of investment in the network, we have the Transpennine route upgrade, which really begins in earnest in 2023. And we have the most significant training obligation in terms of drivers retaining additional route knowledge to work diversion routes to enable the Transpennine route upgrade works to happen. Other operators don't have that level of work. We have that requirement to take forward. And we've also got a hard and fast end date of the December 22 timetable change, when we see a number of required improvements to the timetable coming into place, such as the delivery of the Hull to Liverpool direct service, the many changes happening that relate to the Manchester Recovery Task Force, which has been championed significant by the Rail North Committee going forward, and other changes elsewhere on the network. Now, the issue that we have is a significant part of the training allocation we have would normally be worked through the provision or the utilisation of rest day working, and we've not had that function in the business really for almost a year now. ASLEF, which is our right, decided not to continue with the agreement last December, but the loss of that ability to have rest day working, which would help with training, the extensive programme we've had, the ongoing strikes, the sickness, has compounded the operation we have. But the other factor is that the planning of the rostering without rest day working means that we're in a situation of short notice cancellations, which is where you get to the situation of trains being withdrawn from service probably the evening before, because that's when, from a rostering viewpoint, that space in the schedule would come forward. It's regrettable, but it's preferable to cancel the day before than on the day, because that obviously delivers huge disruption to people who have already made pre-planned journeys going forward. There's an issue here over driving competence, and we have over 500 drivers. We've got more drivers than we've ever had in the business. If I go back 5 years, we had 349 drivers at the December 2017 timetable change. And they're the ones we're trying to get through to basically get us to December 22. And as I said, a significant number of these timetable changes will have to be in place because the timetable comes in, and also a significant part of the training for the Transpennine route upgrade diversion routes have to be completed. Now we're rapidly heading to that point, which means part of the training will be done. Will there be a significant improvement after the December timetable change? There will be a steady improvement. I can't say it will be robust and perfect, because we're still going through a backlog of training to be completed. But we will be in a situation where a significant change point will have been delivered and will have been passed. That will have an impact in terms of trying to reduce the number of cancellations which we have had ongoing. In terms of ongoing delays, that's management in terms of our operations with other train companies as well, freight companies and Network Rail. And as we've been through the autumn period, and I think it's reflected in the report, we've actually had an unprecedented doubling of infrastructure failings in the network. And that's not to say that's another operator's or Network Rail's responsibility, but it compounds what already is a bad situation. Now that has reduced in the last couple of weeks, and there has been a slight performance improvement, but they are further ongoing issues. But we've worked very closely with Network Rail and other operators to do what we can to reduce delays and cancellations in real time as they come through. I think just on the final point, if I covered it was on the flow of information. And you're absolutely right, we have some stations which we're serving in the West Yorkshire area where we are the only train provider, and there's no service 1 hour after that. And they are local stations where we have to work with Northern to make sure that the flow of information is both timely and correct, and customers are being advised on what they need to do, so they know what their options are in advance or in real time as it happens. And I fully take on that there are lots of areas here that the industry and ourselves have to improve in. And equally, where there are staff at stations, it's making sure that they have the information and the tools available to them so they can proactively work with customers and advise them on what they can do and what their options are when disruption happens.
Okay, just come back to Councillor Korshak briefly, then I'm going to Councillor Scullion.
Chair. I'm just picking some of your points. You're saying short notice cancellations. And if you've noticed, last Friday, 6 trains cancelled in the morning from 5 o'clock till 9:30 or something. But there was no arrangement for the customers, like the people, those who are standing in the cold morning. So have you got anything to, in the future, to organise something if there is a cancellation one after the other?
Replacement service.
Replacement service,
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
In normal circumstances, yes, we would have a bus deployed, because having a gap of 6 hours, which does happen because of the rostering issues that I outlined, is not that you simply don't provide anything. We provide alternative transportation, and that would be a bus and that would be a taxi. Now, our colleagues in the bus sector have actually outlined some of the issues that we have, or they're facing in terms of recruitment and those issues. Our bus suppliers who provide rail replacement, even the taxi firms that we use, they also have a challenging situation themselves. And also there's quite an intense ask for rail replacement at certain times when the supply chain is actually competing, delivering for the school run, for example. So these are issues where we definitely know we need to deliver, because it's absolutely crucial to get people, if they can't go by train, on bus. But there are areas that we're absolutely focused on to get right, because again, we can't have people left stranded waiting for something, but also people need to be communicated with so they know there is alternative transport coming to take them forward. And we do have people deployed at certain stations where we can to provide that information, and equally if the last service of the day is affected, then people would automatically be put in bus and taxi provision, and that would be definitely planned in advance so people could get back.
So I think if this is going to be something that continues, then people need to clear, all these councillors need to know what should the passenger do if there's 5 hours without a train, what should they do? Therefore, that's kind of a charter or updated charter I think would be useful for us all to see. Councillor Scully.
Thank you, Chair. In some ways my points really relate to what you've just said by way of summary, and really that's about the robustness of the plans going forward. We here, I think, and as a Transport Committee, we're very sympathetic for the unprecedented circumstances that we've been through, but I am worried that things might get worse rather than better, and I'm worried in terms of obviously the new timetable in December, the usual winter problems that many rail operators have, and also this is before the TransPennine upgrade actually starts to really kick in. Now, I have a particular interest because of the Calder Valley line, and we've already seen, because of some of the problems on the TransPennine route, people crowding onto the Calder Valley trains, line trains, and poor Northern have had to deal with some of the difficulties related to that. So there's potentially a potential storm, perfect storm, in which things might get worse before they get better. So I would echo what the Chair said. Really, plans need to be robust, and at the top of those plans need to be ensuring that the customers actually understand what their options are. I also really would like to think about the station operators. One of the reasons that people are piling onto the Calder Valley trains is they look at the board and they say, well, there's a train to Manchester. They don't know they're going to have a scenic tour through the lovely Calder Valley for some time. but we should be sure that at the stations, at the big stations in particular, people are going to be directed properly. Thank you, Chair.
If there's any ever argument for electrification of the Calder Valley line, it's now, isn't it? Because obviously we all know as Transport Committee members that TRU is going to be disruptive, but I'm not sure government get that yet, and therefore they need to get it quite quickly. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, picking up on the point that was raised about I'll start by just saying thank you for opening your remarks with an apology, because it was needed. I represent the Colne Valley wards, and Marsden and Slowett stations are in that area, and it's TransPennine Express is the only game in town, and I have residents who have lost their jobs because they can't reliably commute, and it's not acceptable. So thank you for opening with an apology. But on the bus replacement services specifically, this is a point I raised a couple of meetings back. When cancellations have happened in recent months, specifically for those stations, the bus replacement service, the journey time between villages all along that line across the border into Greater Manchester don't seem to be particularly realistic journey times. And also often the bus stops or has stopped on Manchester Road to carry on its journey down the valley towards Huddersfield or away from Huddersfield. But as you hopefully should know, Marsden and Slowett stations are actually quite a way up the other side of the valley on the opposite end of the village from Manchester Road. So anybody who's just turned up for their train, finds it's not there, has to walk or run down and up a hill in time to catch the bus replacement service. It's not realistic, especially if they're not young, fit people who can do hill running. So in future, can we make sure that the replacement services actually do go to the stations, please?
Thank you for that, Councillor, and I fully agree with the points you're making. The buses should drop you off and collect you from the station. We do have occasions when our suppliers, there can be errors or just going off in a different route from the drivers who's been briefed to do the job they've been asked to do, and they're the ones where we do take corrective action with the suppliers to make sure that they're fully briefed and they know where they need to drop people off. There have been instances which we've certainly been reviewed and looked at, and some of the user groups have been providing information to us. We also have reports, feedbacks from our own suppliers, which we can then analyse and go through with that. But you're absolutely right, people should be dropped off and collected at the point of the station, not anywhere else in the communities and the villages. So yes, we're definitely on to that, and I do apologise in those circumstances, particularly when they happen, because it's not giving people the exact geographic point that they intend to be at.
Again, I think it's some kind of charter so that those are written down, everybody's clear, I think would be really useful. Councillor Bolt, can we just keep questions brief?
Thanks, Chair. Just tying in with what Matthew said, I believe that the rail, and it's a misnomer calling it a rail replacement, because you're not allowed to take things like bikes on the buses, which you cannot, limited on some trains. So again, if somebody turns up and the rail service is not running, they don't have a replacement. But in Murfield, I believe that the stops are located on Huddersfield Road. So yeah, picking up, as you say, if you go down Station Road to the station and then have to leg it back up. So we need to, as you said, the charter needs to look at. Another brief comment, could we, through WICA, ask Grand Central to at least put their data in, because as a rail service which serves 4 out of the 5 local authorities, linking not only those 4 authorities but a direct service to London, it's a key business thing, so that would be something. And through you, Chair, I think, can I pay tribute and wish well to Pete Myers, because I think he's on his final farewell tour before he retires. I've seen in some of the rail industry magazines that even though he's on his way out, he's still working as hard as he ever did. So I'm sure the committee will join me in thanking him for supporting us for many years.
Absolutely. Are you the cover? Are you on the cover of some of these magazines? Are you then, Pete? Is that, have you earned that accolade?
I'm open for that, but no, I'm not. But I'm talking to some of the groups, so that's what I'm doing.
Centrefold, perhaps. Dave, do you want to come in?
Yes, I mean, I think obviously the particular issues in Colne Valley are fairly pertinent, and obviously Graham's has responded to them. I think the concern that we do have, and I think this is also an issue for Northern colleagues as well as TransPennine, is how far things are going in terms of trying to resolve some of the rest day working and the other sort of impediments to addressing some of the industrial relations issues, and how your relationships with government are going on that. And I think it would be quite useful to get a bit of an update from perhaps Tony initially on Northern and.
So, surely the DFT are not preventing you coming to an agreement. I can't believe they're preventing you coming to an agreement on rest day working. That sounds ridiculous. Because obviously, as you've heard around the table, some massive frustrations.
Yeah, thanks. So I think in terms of industrial relations, it is a challenge, and it does sort of knock on to performance, particularly on the days previously and after strike days. So at the moment, we're not reliant on rest day working for Northern, so we have enough drivers for the December 22 timetable. Having it gives more flexibility. I think the bigger risk going forward is we've took a difficult decision in May to step back the timetable to allow us to get ahead on training, which we've done, and broadly going into December 22 with what I would call a pre-COVID business as usual training position, particularly for the Leeds depot, which is our largest depot on that. But it does give more flexibility, having a rest day working agreement, and I think obviously we're in the sort of the national sort of position at the moment we have an ASLEF dispute next week as well, strike day, and the RMT have just renewed their mandate as well, and that's met all the legal thresholds. So I think it's still, unresolved. I think rest day working, I'm not directly involved with, but I think that some of that is still a conversation between the train operators and government. I think we certainly minded that we would certainly need it for training to make sure we don't get ourselves back in, the ground we've taken in improving the training. That's ground that's sort of hard for, we want to give up as well. So certainly would be very amenable to that. But it is a challenge. I think locally though, the relationships are pretty good. And the staff certainly see this as a major dispute sort of on a national level.
TPE, did you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I fully align myself with the comments for Tony in terms of the national industrial relations issues, which need to be resolved, and then it goes basically to the operator, and then to work through, and hopefully as we move forward we can get there in partnership with the unions. In terms of the rest day working, I think it's important to make the differential that's not industrial relations, and that's not a matter of dispute, because it's an agreement which unions can decide that they're not going to take forward for the members, and that's purely a choice. It's not an IR issue or a dispute or a strike or other factors. In terms of specifically for the Trans-Pennine Express business, we're under a national rail contract at the moment with the government, and under that there are certain consents that we do need to get Department for Transport approval in order to have conversations, and one of them is rest day working. And I certainly appreciate the support of May Braben in terms of writing to the department in terms of just making the case why having rest day working is important for not just for Trans-Pennine but also for Northern as well, and also it does affect cross country as well, who serve West Yorkshire in addition, and we'll see where we go forward with that.
I'm sure we're all, as a Transport Committee, behind Mayor Braben in that plea to government to allow you to go into those discussions, because obviously for our residents and customers of yours, it is so important to get better reliability, and everything we've been talking about today is there's predication on better patronage, and that's never going to be achieved unless we get better services. So I just want to sum up then. Two main things I think was about customer charters. If we can have a bit of feedback on customer charters from the bus operators, and I do think, given we seem to be in a very unreliable world, particularly with TPE at the moment, having a bit of a review of that customer charter and having a bit of sharing about what's meant to happen when things go wrong for the residents, so councillors know how to support residents, would be useful. And I think we also had more granular measures as well of bus operation when we talked about that as well. So we can actually see how that reliability is working out across West Yorkshire will be useful as well. That report is for noting. It's been very useful, and thank you very much, bus operators and train operators coming here. Obviously, there is a lot to improve upon, I'm afraid I have to say. And we will do all we can in terms of roadworks or the improvements we're making on bus corridors, etc., to make your lives easier and therefore our passengers' lives better. But if you can also do all you can with your government's colleagues and with trade unions to make sure that we get things good for our workers as well, for train drivers, for bus operators and bus drivers, so that they can continue to do their job in the best environment, that would seem to be common sense for all of us. So I want to move on now to the final item on this agenda, which is the capital approvals. Melanie, did you want to do something? Obviously, briefly, I'm afraid, but please.
Yes, please. Thanks, Chair. So we've got two schemes for consideration today that are both bringing forward a change request. They want to bring development funding forward so that they can continue to develop the schemes. I'm actually going to ask Fiona Lynn to very briefly just introduce both schemes. They're both part of the Transforming Cities Fund, and Fiona is the lead in that team. Fiona.
Thank you, Melanie. So as we've mentioned, this covers 2 out of the 4 Transforming Cities Fund schemes in Bradford, and this is off the back of a wider change request that was put forward by Bradford that covers how they're also dealing with their financial pressures, but those approvals will be coming through via the Combined Authority at their meeting relating to the overall indicative budget approvals and also the timescales. Moving on to the first scheme, which is the scheme in South Bradford, and this scheme aims to improve transport options for people travelling from the south of the city by creating a high quality bus corridor along the A641 Manchester Road, and in the longer term a bus based park and ride. Manchester Road obviously already has quite a lot of bus priority on the inbound route, and this scheme will enhance that through plugging in the gaps at key pinch points, speeding up buses, making them more reliable, as well as providing for the outbound journeys, linking into the future park and ride facilities. In addition, the scheme will upgrade the cycling infrastructure along the corridor to a modern LTN 120 standards, making it a safer and more attractive option for a wider range of people. The scheme's working towards outline business case submission, and from the previous decision point, the indicative budget was 20 million, and this will be revised down via the inflation review paper to enable the corridor improvements to be delivered. But Bradford does have the ambition to deliver the scheme in full, and a number of funding options are being explored to enable the park and ride site to be delivered in the longer term. The crux of the change relates to the development funding ask, and they are asking for additional development funding to the tune of 2.191 million. During the early development work and optioneering stages, the original site for the park and ride had to be ruled out due to site conditions rendering it unviable. Essentially, the cost of remediation of the site and the ongoing level of risk was assessed to be too high to bring that site forward. So an alternative site is now being proposed. Obviously, this has meant there's additional design and optioneering work has been needed, and that will need to continue before a preferred option can come forward. The appraisal of the change notes that the approach taken by Bradford to contain overall costs and prioritise the schemes should be supported. And it's recommended that the additional development costs are approved in phases for this scheme, so it is being split into 2 phases, with the approval today being given for the first phase to complete the outline business case work on the corridor elements, with the residual funding being approved by the Director of Delivery once Bradford have developed the funding strategy for the park and ride. So therefore the approval recommended today is for 1.866466 million and an approval for the delegated approval to the £325,325. We can go to the next one. Yep. So the second scheme being considered is the Bradford Interchange Station Access Scheme, and this aims to improve the access to Bradford Interchange from the city centre and links to the changes being planned for Horlings and the wider city centre improvements. The improvements will also be made to the user experience in the interchange via internal modifications which complement those that are already being delivered by the combined authorities, such as the new travel centre. In order to make these improvements, demolition of the now vacant NCP car park on Horlings is required. And this will also support Bradford's wider ambition to move to more sustainable transport across the city centre, so reducing the parking stock in the city. The TCS scheme is being brought forward as a joint project with the funding previously allocated from the Transport Fund and is again working towards its outline business case submission. Additional development costs are being requested for the scheme to finalise the outline business case, as well as accelerating the demolition of the NCP car park. And this aspect is critical for a number of reasons. It is linked to the city centre scheme, and it's intended that the site, once clear, will be used as a compound for the early works of the city within the city centre, which will be carefully as part of the phasing plan to minimise disruption across the city. And in addition, the waste from material from the NCP car park will be used to fill Jacobs Well roundabout during that reconfiguration work. So the anticipated costs for delivering the scheme have been taken into account in the inflation review, and a recommendation to a slightly increased budget will be considered for approval by the Combined Authority at its meeting in December. The appraisal of this element of the change notes that the justification has been made for the increased development costs, as well as the acceleration of the demolition of the NCP car park, which is linked to the other priority scheme in Bradford City Centre. And this will help them to enable them to be delivered in time for the City of Culture in 2025. Therefore, Transport Committee is recommended to approve at this time a further £380,500 for completion of the outline business case, and £2,986,772 million for the advanced demolition of the NCP car park.
Thank you very much. All to be done in 2 years from now. Any questions, comments? Councillor Bolt.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Fiona. A couple of quick. The first one, the TCF South Bradford, as the intro on the report says, it says bringing the existing national cycle network. What about Manchester Road for those of us who have to cycle up that to get to and from Kirklees? It's quite precarious coming up there. That, I don't think the on-road is part of the NCN. The NCN goes over the Red Bridge and winds around. And obviously part of gear change and LTN talks about routes being direct, intuitive and everything. So you're not going to get people from, as it says, south of Bradford, which is Kirklees, winding around, particularly if they're commuting. The other one is Hallings, the car park opposite City Hall. So as someone who occasionally comes into St George's Hall or other places, where do theatre goers or anybody else park now? Because I'm trying to think of what the nearest central car park.
So there's one directly behind St George's Hall, the Crown Court car park.
Thank you.
There's also Jacobs Well has reopened, and Broadway's got 1,000 spaces.
Thank you, Jack.
Just come in. Yeah, I'll come in on the optioneering around the cycling infrastructure. So colleagues in Bradford have looked at a number of options for that corridor, and they were, as you say, looking at segregated route along Manchester Road itself. Once they'd started to do further detailed design work and looking at the stats implications for that aspect, unfortunately, it was ruled out on cost grounds, and there is a kind of an existing route that they felt would be of benefit to make those targeted upgrades so that they are of National Cycle Network, sort of LTN 120 standards as an alternative.
Those are being pursued, is what you're saying. Lovely. Any more questions, comments? No. Can I see? Therefore, can I like to propose this? It's Bradford. Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Carroll. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is carried. Lovely. Well, it has gone on rather longer. We were meant to do a rail strategy. I'm afraid we haven't, which I'm not sure how we're going to do that. We'll have to arrange another time to do that, I think, probably. Is that okay?
That's probably fine unless you wanted to do it now.
Well, it's just that we've written out at 4 o'clock, and the meeting finishes at 4 o'clock, so people have other meetings to go to. Can I thank you very much for coming to the meeting, for your attendance or your application to what are very important issues for all our residents. And I will see you next time. We'll have to reorganise perhaps something you're doing online with the rail strategy. Would that be perhaps easier?
Do that, yeah.
And perhaps if we can look out for those invitations in your inbox and get that in the diary as quickly as possible. Possibly evenings as well. Councillors work evenings as well. So I know we do. Thank you very much for your attendance, everybody. Bye bye.